this? I'm not a sound engineer. I just learned stuff from doing this for so long.
Right?
I'm like, let's see if this works. What's this icon mean? Screw it, we're gonna hit that. All right, microphone check. This is the Kickback. We are back again. Back at the Hive, which is extremely exciting for me. This has been a spot that I've been looking at for a while. I don't live in Phoenix yet, so coming down here is kind of a haul. But I'm here with April Howland.
Howland.
Howland. Oh man, I should have looked too. I always look around. I always look.
Yeah. Here's a business card.
Yeah, see, perfect. April Howland, not Howard, Howland.
Yes.
Why am I thinking Howard?
I don't know.
Is there
People
someone in
do
my
that all the
class?
time. It happens all the time.
That's the last time that's going to happen over here then. I'm here with April Howland from April Howland Studios. It's another shop at the Hive. I'm excited. I haven't been in here too much. Last time I came in here, I think you may have been closed, actually. Yeah, I think you might have been closed, so I just didn't get a chance to see. But you were telling me earlier that there are a bunch of local artists here.
Yes.
Which is super exciting. That's something that, like, as I've gotten older, I've appreciated more as local artists. Because, you know, when you're a kid, you want to be Jay-Z, you want to be, you know, you want Nike, and as I get older, I'm like, no, the local scene's
It's pretty cool.
99 times out of 100, the local scene's cool.
Yeah.
In Phoenix, it is hard, though, because this isn't LA, this isn't New York, this isn't, you know, the Bay.
No.
But
We're getting there.
when you say we're getting there, is that somewhere that you think you want to? Do you want to be in LA, or would you rather?
What I mean by that is I think the art scene here is rising fast, especially with the urban artists.
Yeah, the urban art here is starting to go crazy.
But urban art helps sell fine art too. So, because a lot of urban artists are fine artists. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that because we always saw. So it's interesting in my experience because I didn't really grow up anywhere. I was a military brat, and so I came up in Hawaii, I came up in Texas, came up in California. My parents are from Chicago, so it's a little bit weird for me because I don't have I have an appreciation for graffiti, and I have an appreciation for urban art because those two things are a little bit more different than people want to talk about.
Yeah.
But it always seemed like fine art was like hands in pockets, which I did. I'm not sure if you know. So I looked at one of these and I put my hands in my pockets. But it always seemed that fine art was like hands in pockets. This is for rich people.
Oh, well, I wouldn't agree with that completely. I mean, I think a lot of art collectors who collect, you know, older pieces, you know, Picasso's, Monet's, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, they have a lot of money.
Right. Yeah.
But I have a lot of collectors for my own personal art that aren't wealthy people.
I think what's starting to happen is that I think people are starting to appreciate art beyond just like you are only an artist if you are painting. You are only an artist if you are, you know, I think people are starting to feel like, you know what I don't hear anymore that I used to hear a lot, even as a kid, was, oh, my kid could do this. What makes this, you know, modern art?
Right.
And you don't really hear that anymore.
Not a lot.
I mean, here and there you'll hear some old heads kind of say that, but it's very, very rare that someone like younger than like 70 would say something, you know, like that. And I think that kind of goes towards the appreciation because sometimes you like it just because you like the colors.
Yeah. 9 times out of 10. That's why people buy things that they like, is because they like colors.
Yeah. So what, as far as the studio though, what is it that you have here? Like, is there something that you like? What you know? What actually? What got you into it? What got you into?
Oh, I've been drawing since I was 4, and I had a job. I had a couple different jobs before I started painting full time. That was full time. It was about 11 years ago. I've been artistic my whole life, I would say, and both of my jobs before this was artistic. I was a graphic designer for AJ's Fine Foods, and I was a nail tech in North Scottsdale. And did tons of nail art. So it was, everything was very art forward in my life.
Okay.
And when I got to go to Africa for the first time, I came back and quit my job and did my very first art show and sold a bunch of work and kept going after that. So now I own this gallery and I help other artists also sell their work along with mine.
That's something that has always been kind of what drew me more to art at a certain extent. Art and sport, I'd say to a certain extent, are very, very similar in that you do want to reach back and help the next people coming up.
Generally speaking, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
I've found there's been some instances in my
Yeah.
art career that hasn't worked out.
There's some.
Yeah,
there's some.
But for me personally, I have a wonderful mentor named Diana Hessen, who is a very well-established artist here in Scottsdale, and she's helped me with the business side of things and a lot of different aspects of being an artist. And so she helped me, so I feel like I need to pay it forward too. And I love helping other artists sell their work because I love to watch that transaction happen, and then see how people appreciate their work and see how that artist just feels so filled up after that. It's kind of a gift.
It's different than just like, oh, somebody liked this on Instagram.
Yeah.
Because somebody liked it enough that they pulled out their wallet and they told you personally, I like this $250 worth.
Yeah.
Or however much it is, like, I think that is something that it does feel a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're like, oh wait, no, people, like, I can sell this.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not my family,
Right. It starts there, but yeah. yeah. My first piece I sold I was in high school.
Oh wow.
And it was a drawing of a mountain lion, and I grew up in Sedona, and so my grandmother worked at a t-shirt shop in downtown Sedona, uptown Sedona, whatever you want to call it. And the owner saw my drawing, and he's like, I want that on t-shirts. And I was like, okay, sure. He's like, I'm going to pay you for it. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I could get paid for this? So that kind of started it. I really I dig that. So that kind of started the forward progress of my art career.
And Sedona is interesting because that's a completely different vibe than Phoenix.
Oh yeah.
It's not, even like Scottsdale and Phoenix, there's a little bit of crossover. It's not much, but there's a little bit. Mesa and Phoenix is a little bit a crossover, but again, it's not. But
Yeah.
Sedona might as well be Jupiter. Just
You
with
think
like,
so?
well, here's what I mean. So we don't have this quite to the same extent, but when you look at places like, I used to live in California, I used to live in Texas, I used to live in like Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because you always have your financial city and you have your artist kind of city.
Right.
So like
Right.
San Francisco and LA,
Yeah.
which there are a lot of art and finance
Yeah.
in both, but you kind of need that balance.
Sure.
And to me, we don't really have it here because you got Phoenix and then like Tucson's not quite it. They got some good art in Tucson, but it's not a retreat the same way that Sedona is.
Right.
But Sedona is also this like tucked away, everybody knows about it, but nobody really like knows about it.
Yeah.
Mountain town.
Yeah.
It's
Unfortunately,
different.
they know about it now. It is so busy there. My family still lives there, so yeah, it's
Has
busy.
it started picking up now?
Oh, it's they're landlocked at 2:00 in the afternoon. They can't
Oh,
go anywhere.
jeez.
Yeah. So
Because I remember when I first moved here, so my family moved here in 2008, and it was still relatively low key. Like it was, my family lives up north, so it was a little bit more popular just because it was like an hour away from
Sure.
us. Whereas here it's like an hour and a half
Yeah,
away,
yeah.
But
Yeah.
it hasn't gotten that much.
Oh yeah.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, I grew up there. It was a sleepy little town when I was a kid, and now it's a crazy tourist mecca for vortex and crystals and some artwork. There's some art galleries there that are really nice, but
Is that something that I mean, the business side has got to be like, oh, this is awesome. But the artist side of like, and even like, hey, this is where I grew up, and now it's, because we used to go to Sedona just because they had the weird McDonald's that was like green color.
yeah,
You know what I'm talking
arches,
about?
Yeah. The only
and
one in the whole world.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we did go up there to hike,
Yeah.
but I think You know what? Now that I think about it, my buddy flew down from Alaska a couple years ago, and the first thing he said was, "Bro, let's go hike in Sedona," and he wanted to do Devil's Bridge.
Yeah. Now you gotta pay to park, and there's a line to get into
Are you
the paid
serious?
parking, and
Yeah, we just rolled up last time, and this was like 3 years ago.
yeah, it's not like that anymore.
So what do you see? Because I mean, judging by, you guys aren't here to see, but judging by body language and your tone, that's not something you're a fan of. Do you see artists going further north or kind of dispersing to like a Prescott, a Flagstaff?
I mean, there's art everywhere.
It just won't be that same mecca.
I think the art world has changed so much because I mean, we like here in Scottsdale, we used to have galleries that lined Main Street and Marshall Way, and half of them are gone. And so, a lot of the older collectors who appreciate art are, finishing their life cycles, right? And then we've got the new generations coming up that don't really own anything. They don't own their homes. They don't own music. They don't own movies. They rent everything. Apple, Spotify. Like, think about what you actually own anymore. And so it's our job, I think, as in my generation, as in my 40s, and artists in my generation, it's our job to teach people why art is still valuable. So it is changing.
Yeah.
And eventually, I think when like the millennials grow up and get older and do finally buy a home, they might start looking at art in a different way. But like it doesn't. It's not there yet.
I think it's hard too because, like okay, I'm moving here in about a month or so.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I'm 28. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've been in a lot of places. So to me, it's a little bit different. Even when I was in the Army, I was still going to art shows and stuff like that in Georgia and Virginia and stuff. So it's a little bit different for me. But I'm thinking about my younger brother. My younger brother's 4 years younger than me. My other one is 5 years younger than me. And I'm thinking about them. And if they weren't exposed to me being like, no, buy this, no, you need to, support the artist, buy the merch from the concert, stuff like that. I do kind of wonder, like, if you're going to get an apartment, is it easier just to go to Target and spend $25 on something where you're like, oh, that's nice, or do you want to pay your first month's rent?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, I think when you have the money to spend, it's nice to go build a relationship with people who are creative. I mean, when you sell art, it is always a transaction and a relationship.
Yeah.
I can probably name every single person that has bought a piece of my artwork.
Really?
And I know them somewhat personally. Like, eventually.
I've noticed that with my tattoo artists.
Yeah,
because a lot of my tattoo artists also paint or also draw something.
There's a relationship aspect to artwork, and if you walk into some place and see something and get a chance to meet the artist or start following that artist, then all of a sudden you become interested in their life and why are they painting this and how did they get there and what inspired them to do this and all those things. And so. I think selling anything is a relationship. Art is no different in that category.
That's I talked to Neil on Monday. Wow, that seems like it was last month. I talked to Neil on Monday, and one thing that I told her was, I've been on this weight loss journey, and one of the big things was like cutting out fast food. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of art now is kind of Spotify curated playlists, and it's collaborations with a designer, but it's not Louis Vuitton, it's Louis Vuitton for H&M.
Right.
I feel like there's a lot of things like that, which has its place. Like, I don't want to downplay that because a lot of younger artists, that's how they get their start.
Sure.
So, but as far as, making people realize that, hey, this is a steak, this is not a hamburger.
Right.
How do you do something like that? How's that?
You just talk about it. Like, every artist in here has a story. You just talk about it. You talk about their story. Like we've got some pieces in here right now that are textile. Like, and why? That's so crazy and so different. Like what made them do that? And then learning the story. So when we do our First Fridays here at the Hive, I have every first Friday, almost every first Friday, we have a new show with new artists. And so the artists are here to come meet, to come tell you their process, to come tell you why they're inspired to do what they do. And that's when we generally sell the work. So
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I think more people, and this again, as I get older, you don't realize how much story matters. Even in sports, like my brother, he kind of gives me a hard time. I'm a big sports fan, and he kind of gives me a hard time because, you know, he'll kind of make fun of me, and he'll, oh man, well, you know, would you even watch this if you didn't know the story?
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, just like, you know, to me there are certain things that like you might just like painting, you might
Right.
just like, you know, basketball or whatever it is. But he's totally right. Knowing the story and being like, man, we always lose to this team, and now we're about to.
Makes it better.
It does make
Yeah.
it better.
Yeah.
It does make it better, and that's something that I used to work in IT a lot. Like 7 years I worked in IT, and we knew that eventually everyone's fears of like, oh, like who's going to take our jobs? I'm like, yo, it's the robots.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be able to automate almost everything,
Yeah.
probably in the next 20 years. But what you can't automate is somebody's story,
Yeah.
and you can't automate that kind of handmade art, you know.
Yeah. Stories, I mean, stories have been, you know, around since the beginning of time. I mean, if you think about caveman days and hieroglyphs and petroglyphs and all the things, there's always a
Oral
story.
tradition too, which
Yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Like imagine, like when I read Homer for the first time, the Odyssey for the first time, it was like it's a fat book. And then he's like, yeah, they would just pass this down orally, and then people would make changes. I'm like, can you imagine memorizing that whole story?
Yeah, right.
And like telling it so often that like your son and then
Yeah.
your nephew. That's
Yeah. Stories have been around forever.
Yeah.
It's how we relate to each other. So I think pieces of artwork are stories being told, and that's part of the reason why people love to collect from artists. They love their story. They love everything. Like, you know, I have, in all of the work that I do personally, all of my paintings have a story, and generally have a philanthropy aspect to it
I like that.
of some sort. And you know, I always give my collectors the option to hear the story or not hear the story. Some people want to make their own story. Some people want to hear your story. Generally speaking, though, I would get mostly, I want to hear the story. Why did you paint this certain tiger? Why did you paint this certain lion? Why did you paint whatever? So.
I like what you said though, that they want to make their own story.
Yeah, sometimes I do.
I'm interested in it. So like when you see stuff like that, is it just somebody wants to,
I think
like somebody just kind of has their own idea of what something is?
like it reminds them of something. I sold a piece of artwork this last year, and it was a tree, a big canopy tree with a bench underneath it. It was really simple, and the lady that I sold it to came in, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, like this reminds me of sitting on the park bench with my mom when I was a kid," and that was her story. So I didn't even share my story of why I painted it. And my story was completely different. My story was, it was the beginning of the pandemic, and I felt so alone and secluded, and here was this empty bench with this tree.
I love that because it's almost the opposite.
Yeah.
It's almost the complete inverse,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you just kind of leave it up to, you know what, hey, that's kind of one thing that I've noticed has been a debate, was what means more, the artist's meaning or the not observer, but you know, the
Collector, the buyer.
we'll say the collector.
Yeah.
But the collector's meaning, and I've always hated that question because like it doesn't matter.
I mean, it only matters if you think it matters.
Well, and it with like, well, who does it mean more to? It's like,
Right.
well, that's why quantify that.
No, yeah.
But also, people interpret things in different ways.
Absolutely. Some people like artwork just because I like the colors. Like, oh, I've seen 500 mountain paintings, but I like the mountain painting there because I dig the colors. So like, you know, you just never know.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's so. I'm definitely like that more with music, and I've caught myself a few times being one of those music guys where it's like, do you even listen to the lyrics, or do you just listen to especially in hip hop, just because there is so much being said there, but people generally don't hear it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's interesting because there are some times when it's just like, and even from a creative standpoint, I used to think that everything needed to have a meaning, and now it's kind of like sometimes it just means that I like it.
Yeah, sometimes it's that simple.
Yeah.
For sure.
So what do you see as far as in the future with Instagram, with NFTs, with like how do you move with that?
It's a good question. I think everybody's asking that. It's funny that you asked that because I spent, I don't know, probably a good like 3 months just kind of learning about NFTs this year and going through the process of making one. And
how do you feel about them?
I don't get it.
Okay.
I get it in a certain sense. Like it's a way to copyright your work. It's a way to protect it, even though it's really not, because there was just a huge theft of NFTs.
Yeah, because
right?
Control C, Control V, and right click, and you're good. Yeah.
The NFTs that I see are more caricatures or moving.
I'm shocked that became like the go-to.
Yeah, and what's the value? Like I don't understand, and that's what I need to talk to people who buy them because I don't know anybody who buys an NFT yet.
I know a guy who makes them.
But who buys them? And so that's my question is that, and I haven't figured that out yet.
Well, what's interesting to me when you look at NFTs especially, there is kind of that demographic of, oh, it's this kind of person. And nobody wants to be that kind of person. Like what I've been seeing is like a lot of like, frat bank financial bros.
And what do they do with them when they buy them?
I don't know.
That's my other question. Like
you
why?
Sell them? But to me, what's interesting.
So it's like a trading. It's more of like maybe a baseball trading.
Yeah, I'm like, is this just Pokemon? Well, I had to ask.
Like Pokemon.
Yeah, I asked my friend. I'm like, yo, is this just Pokemon?
Yeah.
And my friend actually had a really, really good idea.
It's a really good analogy, actually.
When somebody said it was blockchain Beanie Babies, and I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah, right.
But my friend actually told me because we did a whole podcast about it a couple months ago, and because I didn't get it, and I went into it thinking, this is a ripoff, this is stupid.
Yeah.
And he kind of flipped me because what he was telling me was, don't look at how these big companies are doing it. It's like that's the dumb way to do it. He's like 9 times out of 10 when you look at a big company doing something, they're doing it the wrong way.
Right.
He's like, think about it like this. He's like, all it is a virtual receipt.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool. And he's like, so if you own this artwork, you own the copyright to it. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm with you. And he's like, which means that he's a musician. He's like, as a musician, I can sell you my beat, and you can do whatever you want with it, and I've already bought it.
Right, that makes a lot of sense for a musician.
And I'm like, okay, cool.
Yes.
I'm like, but what about an artist? He goes, bro, they're doing it just like for no reason. He's like, this is how you license shirts.
Right.
He's like, this is how you license merch. This is how you do things, and the artist is already paid.
Right.
And he's like, plus, once you own it, you can do whatever you want with it. You can flip it, you can do whatever. So I'm like, okay, cool. I can kind of see how this works because at that point, you don't need to go through anybody else.
Right. Yeah, NFTs are completely different from fine art.
And I don't think they're done. I think they just kind of gave us like a bunch of cookie dough. I was like, this is an NFT, and we're like, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
You didn't even mix the eggs in. It's just a bowl of stuff, dude.
Yeah. It's still very new. It's still very out there a little bit.
Is there anything you're excited to see as far as fine art goes?
It's hard to say, like, because galleries are closing down, and then I opened one. I understand how difficult it is to find buyers for art because there's so much art out there, and there's so much good art out there. So, I think that moving forward, for me anyway, it's trying to work with people like designers, interior decorators, like that kind of thing, like. And then and then proposing, buy local art, don't go to Target or IKEA. Like let's look at the local artists here and put a price tag on that when you're showing, this space or this home. Or
that's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
If you just had it a showing where it's like, I think that would work.
Yeah.
Because I think that system makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons too,
Yeah.
because it's going to be more unique than just going to IKEA.
Right.
Shout out to IKEA's meatballs. I know they're not that good. I don't care.
They're okay.
They're
okay.
I'm half Swedish, so I have a lot of Swedish family.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like my dad and mom can make like really good Swedish meatballs,
Yeah.
and then the meatballs from IKEA were like I can make it. You know, me and McDonald's both make good burgers
Right,
too. It's like
right,
it's kind of like that,
right.
but it is different for art just because.
What I kind of envision a little bit was NFTs, and I could be completely off base with this, but so I just did a big commission painting of dolphins.
Cool.
For a couple in California, and that's what I used to build my first NFT, was that image. And so I went in and I learned how to make, I bought the program and learned how to use it, make it move so the water moves, like the dolphins look like they're splashing in the water. And that was my NFT. And then I figured out, all of the back end stuff, like how to copyright it, how to do all that, how to list it, how to do that. And then it sat there. And that's what I'm like, okay, now what do I do with it? But what I kind of envision for future art collectors, maybe even future NFT collectors, is, we have those TVs, you've seen them in like upper class homes where they look like just a picture frame.
Oh, yeah.
So like I could see fine artists going that direction a little bit. Like if you buy the painting, you have the option to have the actual painting or have the NFT digital version of that painting. And you can show it on that TV, and you can change your artwork out. So for art collectors, that's cool because then you don't have to store actual factual canvas or board or whatever it's painted on.
Yeah.
But you have a catalog of different art that you can show for different events, for different moods.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, so I kind of think for fine art that where it could eventually lead to, but I haven't seen it yet. So
I can definitely see it going that way. What's been interesting, I've noticed, is a lot of hip hop artists have started getting into the fine art side of things, and it's guys that you wouldn't expect too. And what's cool about that is that so this guy, it's a very famous painting, and I'll show it to you later, but he made it the cover of his album. And on the digital version, just like what you were saying, the album cover moves. And it looks super cool.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering too is fine art on the way back just because we have people talking about artists now, because that wasn't happening before. We didn't know who a lot of these, people who are still doing fine art. Like we know Picasso, we know Dali and stuff like that, but we don't even think about, this is still happening.
Yeah. You're never gonna shut creatives down. Creatives are always gonna create,
I think it's just because fine art isn't the style right now. I think it's coming back, but I think it's just not. We, for the past 10 years, have been worshiping Banksy.
Right.
And it's cool. I like a lot of the stuff he does. One of my friends actually does urban art, and he said, "Bro, it's all stencils. Who cares?" Which he's right, but but I do think.
But he's got an aesthetic that pleases people, and he's got a message that pleases people, most people, or it doesn't. That's kind of the point of art too, is just to get people talking. So
I think that's what is going to help too, is because I think abstract art has really done crazy things. There's a lot of really cool abstract art out there, but I've noticed that even in fashion, people are looking at more abstract art of things. That's why the piece that you're working on right there, that's why it's so interesting to me, is because there is a lot of abstract to it, but you can tell that it's a thing.
Right.
And I think that you're gonna see everything kind of cycle back into each other.
Yeah. I mean, like you said with fashion, it does that anyway. So I mean, art never is gonna go away completely. There's always gonna be a gallery. There's always gonna be places to go view art. But what the future holds for as far as the business side of it is interesting to me. So
I've always wondered if you I didn't even know until I was probably 13 that people bought art from galleries. I thought it was just like a museum, and I wonder if there's something like that too, where it's people don't realize that no, you can own this, dude. Because if you didn't have the prices of how much they cost in here, would people even know that they could buy it?
Probably not. Yeah, probably not. Yeah, that's a good question. But I mean, generally speaking, we are a gallery, so generally speaking, people know that galleries are a place that you can go purchase something. So
I'm interested in seeing as far as the longevity of certain things too, because I think, to me, honestly, you can have Instagram, you can have OpenSea, you can have, you know, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. I don't think it's the same as seeing it with your eyes.
Oh, I agree. I'm an art collector myself, and I don't buy anything that I haven't actually stood in front of.
Really? So everything, like, there's nothing like sight unseen that you just...
No, unless I know the artist.
Yeah.
And I've seen their work up close.
Okay.
If I know their work and I know their quality, then yeah, maybe. But everything that I own right now in my collection is all stuff that I've stood in front of before.
It's different.
Mm-hmm.
There was a debate a while ago of it was a very silly debate. I play a lot. I'm a big gamer, so it's a very, very silly debate. But I'm here for silly debates. I support silly debates wholeheartedly. They said, does it count as beating a video game if you didn't play it and you only watched it on YouTube? And I was like, no, what kind of question is that? But there's a lot of people who were saying, yeah, like, you finished it, right? And I kind of think that, like, well, just because you saw a picture of the Louvre does not mean that you've experienced everything that has to offer.
No.
You know, just because you've seen, you're going to notice things. A camera can only do so much.
Yeah. Cameras, with artwork especially, cameras are hard to show, you know, brush strokes or palette movement, or, you know, I mean, even like with graphite, there's texture in the paper with a piece that's made out of graphite, you know, and so
I didn't understand why the medium mattered until I started like looking at different art classes and noticing, oh, this is oil, this is, like you're saying, graphite, this is ink, this is, you know.
Yeah, taking photos of your work is important, but it also flattens it. Like you can't see all that. You know, I do a lot of work with resin lately, and I have to photograph my work before I resin it because of the glare from just light outside, lights inside, whatever. It's hard to photograph for me, and so. But even if I was successful at it, you wouldn't be able to tell in a photograph that it was shiny.
You know who taught me about that? And this is actually something that you would not expect, you know, as far as fine art goes, that I think another reason why it's coming back. Have you ever watched those art restoration videos on YouTube?
Yeah.
If you haven't, I understand, they're like 4 hours long. Like,
I have a good friend who's a well-known artist here in Arizona, and he started his career as a restoration guy, so yeah.
Because I think when you actually see what it really looks like and how much goes into it, I think that's changed a lot of people's perspective too.
Yeah.
There was one, I cannot remember the painting, I can't remember the video, but it all looked like a brownish orange. And then when the guy who was restoring it actually restored it, there were like beautiful blues and greens, and it was just years of wear and tear and oxidization.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
That's probably actually, you know, how you're going to not save, but like how you're going to, you know, do stuff with NFTs is, hey man, you don't have to worry about oxidation.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of positives to it. I can see that for sure.
But again, it kind of goes away once you start talking about, oh well, I have to photograph it.
Right.
You know, it's not going to be the same as having.
You don't see all the fun intricate details that you do. You know, like this artist over here. You can't see it obviously on this podcast, but the one with the white in the middle, she paints with her hands.
Oh really?
She doesn't use a brush, but look at how much movement is in that piece, and you wouldn't catch that, I don't think, in a photo.
It would look like glare.
It just looks flat. Like right now, there's a lot of
what's that on my phone, man?
Yeah, like right now, I feel like there's a lot of depth in there and stuff, but the camera just changes it so much. So
it does.
Yeah.
It does. It's funny too because even pictures of pictures.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
No, there's not the vibrancy, the depth, all of that stuff is off.
Yeah, it's not quite, and I think that too is what kind of made me appreciate a lot of these things more. Is I don't want to say that, you know, people are just messing up their art, but like I like the little like mistakes that you see. Like I got one of my tattoos is I thought that he was gonna start on the outside of my pec, and he started on the inside, and so there's like a mark where I jumped because I wasn't ready for it. You know, and I kind of wonder how many times an artist is doing something like a kid yelled, or like, you know, a cat like ran by or something like that, and you don't get that same that same energy.
Yeah, that's true. I did a piece a while back, and it was an American buffalo, a bison, and it was on a piece of wood, and I resined it, and I left it. You know, when you resin a piece, you have to like let it cure for 24 hours before you really want to handle it. And I came back in to check it like the next day, so it was still curing. But a fly had landed in the resin and got stuck and died in the resin. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, that stays. I mean, it's part of the piece now. So, and it makes sense. I mean, bison are covered with flies, so it made sense, right? But that was a happy accident, like as Bob Ross used to say, happy little accidents. So yeah, well, you missed that part of it, I think, and the story behind it. And again, it comes back to the story for me.
That I think I love those stories too, because I like seeing how art made itself. You know, sometimes it's like I said, I hang out with a lot of musicians, and sometimes it's like a great example from a very popular musician. Kanye West had a song a couple years ago where he did the drums, and he just said pa 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 pa, and people were like, "Yo, why did you do that on the drums?" And his answer was, "I couldn't figure out how to make the drums work on the sound without compression, or without, you know, the compression being off.
Right.
So I just did it.
Yeah.
And it was a test, and then someone heard it, and they were like, "No, that's got to stay."
Yeah, we're gonna use that. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the coolest parts of art, is something where it's like, this blue is really weird, you know, with this black, or this purple is really, you know, screw it. We're just gonna do something different.
Yeah. There's I'm a big Aerosmith fan, and Sweet Emotion at the very beginning of that song, you know, the maraca sound, the sound. Apparently the day that they went in to record that track, he forgot, Steven Tyler forgot his maracas, and he's like, well, we can't do this song without that sound. And they're like, well, we've only got the studio for, you know, so many hours, and we don't have time for you to go retrieve them. Right. And so he went into like the break room and grabbed 2 packets of sugar, and what you hear on the actual recording in the microphone is the sugar in the packet.
And it's things like that kind of make you realize, like, sometimes you step back.
Yeah.
Sometimes
cool, right?
you just,
But again, that's a story.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And it makes you appreciate that song even more. You're like, oh my gosh, it's sugar.
So what's your favorite art story? I know that that's very all-encompassing, but if you had to pick, or you know what, let's not do favorite, because favorite's not fun. Everybody always like talk, oh, who's the best and what's your favorite? That's not fun. What's the one that's jumped out at you the most?
My own or other people's?
Yes.
Okay.
Just, whatever one is like, that's the one that you want to pass on to like your great-great-grandkid.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell one of my own experiences just because it was pretty awesome. I paint a lot of wildlife, and I paint from my own experiences. So I travel and view wildlife in their natural habitats, and then I come home and I use my sketches and my journal entries, and I start creating my series of work. And so my very first time I went to Africa, we were on a game drive, and it was almost nighttime, and there was a leopard up in the tree with a kudu kill. And, and underneath the tree was 2 different prides of lions, 2 lioness with a bunch of their cubs. And it was getting dark, so we had the spotlight up in the tree, and we were kind of just watching the scene, and I had my camera, but it was too dark to really get any good photos, so just enjoying, you know, just watching nature. And the lady that was sitting next to me, keep in mind we're in an open Land Rover, right? So no top, no door.
Oh, yeah, like the Jeep looking ones. Yeah.
And so she taps me on the leg, and she goes, look to your left very slowly. And I was like, okay. And I looked to my left, and there was this lioness's head right here. I saw her whiskers, like, and I could have touched her nose. And she was just staring at me. And we
like a dog?
shared a moment. Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you know,
like
she was just right there. Yeah.
Hey, man.
Now, if I had reached out and cut her, I would not have an arm.
Sure.
But we shared this like crazy moment, and as she walked away, I got some photos of her and stuff. And when I came back from that trip, that was the first piece I started. And I started it, and I got like halfway through it, and I didn't like where it was going. So I stuck it on the wall, and it lived on the wall for 2 years. While I painted the rest of the series, sold almost the rest of the series, started a new series.
Yeah.
And finally one morning I woke up and I just had this epiphany, and I'm like, I know what I'm going to do with this piece. So I took it off the wall, dusted it off, finished it that night, and 2 days later we were on our way to Santa Fe to do a show, and it was the first piece that sold, and it was still wet. But it took 2 years in the making in my mind to create the scene that I wanted to create. And apparently, that's what it needed. So. I
think that, those stories like that are, again, why I love hanging out with artists and why I love talking to artists, because you hear stuff where it's like, I had to stop. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that doing art has taught me. It's weird because, so what I do, and I've mentioned this before, and none of you guys have found it. And I'm very upset because I also haven't been on it in a long time for a similar reason. So I have this Instagram page that I think I might have actually legitimately told one person about.
Okay. So you're going to tell me later, right?
Maybe, we'll see. I've only told maybe one person. And it's because when I was younger, when I was in high school, there's a lot of really a lot of just weird stuff in my life. So I had family die. My dad was deployed a lot. I was in a new place, and that was kind of the first time I experienced oh, hey, this is depression, dude. You are this is bad. And so a friend of mine, she's like, dude, you can't live like this. And she gave me a notebook. She's like, I just want you to write, and I don't want, you don't have to tell me anything, just write. I'm like, okay, cool. And when I write it, you can tell I'm good with words. When I wrote, it just all came out as rhymes.
Oh, okay.
And the weird thing is, I think that's what got me deeper into music was my appreciation for just how things sound. So my mom's from the city of Chicago, and for her dad listened to a ton of music. His music collection's stupid. Yeah. It's records and then CDs, and then it's his collection is insane. And it was a lot of 70s, Joni Mitchell, sure. Kenny Loggins, who's the best,
Awesome. Yeah.
Prince, who I have a theory about Prince. And then my mom got into a lot of again, 80s in Chicago, a lot of house, a lot of, stuff like that. And then my dad, 80s guy who grew up, listening to Aerosmith, Metallica, Judas Priest, all that. So I grew up with hearing all these different sorts of music. So when I got older, it was, I started listening to EDM, because this is 2003, 2004 now, so the EDM scene started to go. Started listening to a bunch of hip hop, but to me, I didn't want to hear. Now I appreciate it now for what it is, but I didn't want to hear that's this hip hop. This is, because I grew up listening to a lot of underground stuff, especially in California, a lot of underground. And so just lyrics mean so much to me, where it's your beat can sound nice, but I want to hear what you're saying. And so as I wrote, that's kind of what I gained an appreciation for. Is it's hard to write this, especially because it's funny. In real life, I swear all the time. When I write, I never swear.
Yeah.
Because to me.
You don't need to.
Not even that. I want to challenge myself. Right. It's easy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that rhymes with damn.
Right.
I'm like, oh man, this is easy. And to me, and no disrespect to guys who swear in their music. That's whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me at all. But I think when I started writing, it kind of came out as oh, okay, cool. This is how this feels to create something. And I always I never knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to play football. I wanted to play basketball. And I was always writing. And this secret page that I made on Instagram, that again, very disappointing, you guys. It was I don't think I've even said what it is.
Well, then how are they supposed to find it?
There is a way. It's because I'm kind of doing a little bit of an ARG, an augmented reality game with it too, but it hasn't fully developed. So it's you talk about, we were talking about raw cookie dough earlier.
Yeah.
There's eggs and there's flour, and all I did was throw a bunch of chocolate chips in a bowl. That's what that is. But I found a bunch of cool graphic design and graphic art from Reddit, Instagram, and all these places. and I write how it makes me feel. But the way that I write it is from the perspective of a very particular character.
Okay.
And I've noticed that there are some times when I'm like, I know I'm forcing it. Because to me, you know, in my mind, which is funny because how I am with the rest of my life, but like how regimented, like, yo, if you're a rapper, it is 16 bars,
right,
3 verses,
right,
a hook, that's it. And then now I've kind of been experimenting with, well, what if we did 24 bars?
Right.
What if we did AABB, AABB?
Yeah.
What if we did AB, CCC?
Yeah.
You know, like, what if we tested, what if we use the same word, because I hate using the same word twice, but what if we use the same word as the hook? And remember, you can't swear.
Yeah.
You know, so it's been challenging to do that. And the thing that I've learned about patience is just like, dude, you're not in a rush anymore.
Right.
You don't have a deadline to do. That's another reason why I love it being secret, is because I haven't touched it in maybe like 2 months.
Okay. Yeah.
And
yeah, that painting's been on the wall for 2 years.
Yeah. And I think just
people would ask me too, what are you gonna do with that? I'm like, I don't know.
Isn't that the most freeing thing? Is
I
like
might
to
just
not
throw it
know
away.
something.
I don't know. Like, I don't know.
I've seen people sell unfinished work.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, I like how it is. And you're like, really? Yeah.
There was no place to go with it, so that's where it ended up. But yeah, I mean, there's been tons of those in my life that just didn't go anywhere.
It's funny too.
Or painted over, or
yeah, and I think the fun part of that is, you know, there's times when where I've come up with like, yo, this is a dope 2 bars. And then I leave it and I'm like, that wasn't a dope 2 bars, you know, like, I'm done with this. But heck.
Do you know Billy Joel, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant? You know that song?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's 4 different songs he started. So next time you listen to it, go and listen. And there's 4 different stories in that song. And then he meshed them together to make one song. So interesting.
It is, and just because you can tell, like, there's some songs so you can tell like how frustrated they were. It's like, we gotta do this another take, and then eventually you're like, dude, this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting. I heard an interview with him. And I love, as an artist and a creative, I love listening to interviews with musicians because they're always fascinating to me. But
have you watched Tiny Desk yet?
No, not yet.
The NPR's Tiny Desk.
Not
Oh my God, I think it's honestly the best thing that's happened to music since Napster.
Cool, I'll check it out.
Just because you want to talk about telling stories, they don't tell you to tell stories.
Right.
They're like, but it's literally like this size, and you've got musicians, and sometimes they tell stories. Like Usher was just on, and he brought a full band. Again, this is something about this size.
Yeah.
And he was telling stories like, yeah, this is something that, you know, really put me on the map, and honestly, I didn't think that it would really go that far, and blah, 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 and just, it adds so much depth to it.
Yeah. See, it goes back to stories.
Yeah.
Goes back to stories.
It always does.
Yeah.
It always does.
Yeah.
So besides, you mentioned music, what other kind of mediums of art do you appreciate? Not necessarily from like I like movies perspective, but from like, this is going to help me create perspective.
Well, I listen to music a lot. I think, like, I was always, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be on stage. I always wanted to sing. I cannot sing a note to save my life. Nobody wants to hear it, so it's okay. But I appreciate it so much. So I don't know. I mean, I love all types of art. You know, like what's not to love? Like written word, like you know, spoken word. Even some of it I like, and photography, music. I mean, you name it. Like authors. You know, just all sorts of stuff. So.
My brother wants to be a screenwriter, and I was watching a lot of screenwriter videos with him, and he was asking me like, hey, why do you watch all these, like, if you don't want to be a screenwriter? And I'm like, that's a valid question. Yeah. And to me it was, well, I have a bunch of ideas for stories, just kind of in general, and I really want to eventually get to the point where I can make music that tells stories, and framing it as a movie makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I find I'm really inspired by just other people's stories for sure. You know, like I think that's part of the reason why I travel so much is because I get to go meet locals in different communities that get to tell me their stories, and then I get to kind of use that as inspiration to create what I create. So like, you know, like I take people, for the last 10 years now, I've been taking groups to Africa and teaching them about animal conservation and why it's so important. And this coming up October, I get to take a whole group of people with my business partner, Susan Ritchie Smith, who she's a great photographer. But we are taking a group of people and we're spending a whole day with the ProVet wildlife team to go help them dehorn a rhino or tag a cheetah or whatever they need to do that day, and learn from what they're seeing and come back and teach other people and try to build an understanding about conservation in a real way, you know.
Okay.
So, but again, that's their stories that they're sharing with me that I can now pass on to you, and through my art or through words or whatever, like, you know, on Instagram even, like, you know, we tell those stories to help. To help inspire other people to come and help do the work.
When it comes to the conservation, I have a theory, and it's not quite airtight, and I know that, but I have a theory that most people believe strongly in one thing, and it's very hard to, you know, have your attention in other places. Like, I'm not saying that you can only support one cause. I'm saying that most people have only one cause that, like, really hits them that way. So, like, you've mentioned conservationism. Really good with words, remember? Conservationism a lot. And what got you into that, and when did you decide to kind of make that, like, oh, I can push this with my art?
The first time I did go to Africa, my safari guide, his name is Lennox, he's still a very good friend of mine, but he was working with Africa Foundation, which is a global nonprofit, and they help sustain communities in different ways.
Okay. And
so he took us into one of the little communities near where we were staying in our lodge, and walked us through a project they were fundraising for at the time. And it was this school, it was an elementary school. And
cool.
Some of the kids, you know, like, I mean, it was very, very, very poor little community at the time. It was thatched roofs, mud huts, that kind of thing, you know, all dirt. Some kids had clothes, some had jackets, some didn't have shoes. Like, you know, it was that type of scene. And we go in and we learned that kids get their one meal a day at school generally. And their kitchen was a pot with rocks underneath it, and that fed 500 kids every day. And so they were fundraising for a kitchen, which would be a safe place for them to cook food, handle food, you know, protected from the elements, you know, that kind of thing. So that there's not dirt in their food, like, you know, just things that we always take for granted. And so when we left there, I told Lennox, I said, I really want to help do something with this. You know, who do I talk to? So he put me in touch, gave me the name of who I would talk to here in the States. And we fundraised one of my paintings, we auctioned it off, and we raised enough money to help be part of that project.
Oh, wow.
And helped build that school kitchen. And so 7 years later, the second time I got to go back, I got to walk through that kitchen and talk to the kids. And they were so grateful and so appreciative that thank you for helping us. And they just love learning. And now this whole like community that was dirt and these little, you know, mud houses were paved roads and some little businesses, and now they feed 1,000 kids and all of this. So what happens for them first is that, you know, we'll look at a project, and once that project is done in South Africa anyway, like say for instance the school, the government will then bring in running water and electricity and pay the teachers who are volunteering their time. And so then what happens is all the people from around in different villages hear that and come here because they want their kids to be fed, be educated in a safe environment. And so, and then all of a sudden these little businesses pop up. And when we do these projects, you know, we're hiring people that are in the villages to do the work. You know, we're buying the supplies in Africa. Like, so it's all sustainable for that community.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, and for me, since I'm such an animal conservationist, I know that these kids who are going to grow up to be leaders of their own world and their own country and protect what they know to be true that is so important in their whole country is the tourism and the animals and the land, and because there is no land like Africa anymore in the whole world. Not with that much empty land.
Yeah.
And they know they have to preserve it. They just don't know how. So my hope.
That's kind of how it is. So I say back home, I grew up mostly in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that really stuck to me the most, is like they taught us as little kids. Like I was there from like maybe 3rd grade to my freshman year. They taught us about respecting the island, and taking care of the land and making sure that if you pick up a seashell, you put down a seashell.
Yeah.
If you pick up a rock, you put down a rock. Like you can't, no littering, nothing like that.
Well, this is really important work in Africa that we're doing because a lot of right now the rhino horn, ground up rhino horn, is worth more than gold or silver. And it's because of a non-existing reason, like somebody in China, a princess or somebody said that it was either an aphrodisiac, or it helped sexually, or it cured cancer, one of those things, or all those things have been mentioned. But the poachers generally end up being the people who live there, and they need to feed their families, and so they get paid to go kill these animals for the horn, so they can pay for their families and feed their families. So our hope is that we create the sustainable villages that they get to learn and have other skills, and then go and feed that back to their communities.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing, is that you can't always be patient in a situation.
Oh, this is going to be a very long time.
Yeah, well, and like that poacher, like it sounds bad, people, oh man, well we got to stop poachers. It's like, well, yeah, a lot of these guys, like you said, they're from there,
and they don't want to, but they have to feed their family.
If you have a right now choice of, hey, and the wildest thing to me is that like $500.
Yeah, they don't get much.
No. And you're gonna flip it for 20,000, 30,000, and then that guy's gonna flip it for, but it's just one of those things where it's just like, again, back to the a different type of patience, but that patience of like, if we can push this, maybe he can't stop. No. But maybe his kid won't. Maybe his grandkid.
Right? Exactly. So I think that as far as being an artist, for me anyway, and painting from wildlife and nature, that's what fuels me.
Do you consider it like political or social work then?
Definitely social.
Okay.
Some of it's political. I mean, we have to work with the African government. The foundation does. I don't personally, because they work with the foundation, but I've understood a lot more now, just because I've been there and talked to people, and so it's pretty important work, I think. And
I think most art does get better when it does have a little bit of weight added to it. And again, goes back to the story.
Yep, always.
Goes back to the story.
Always.
So what do you have coming up that you want to plug? Anything that you're excited about?
Well, coming up, I'm part of the committee that started the art program at the Phoenix Zoo. And we have some exciting news coming up, so everybody should be paying attention to the Phoenix Zoo within the next year. We actually have the very first art program in any zoo in the country. And we're teaching people through many different artists about nature and conservation and all that stuff. The Phoenix Zoo is actually really good at conservation and helping animals.
That's very interesting to me, because the idea of a zoo in the desert. And even more so an aquarium in the desert. Unless you want to go for another hour and a half.
That's a whole nother talk. But the Phoenix Zoo is accredited zoo. They are big with animal conservation. They help save species. They do a lot of good work. So
I'm spoiled too, because I lived in Monterey when I was a kid.
Of course.
So the Monterey Bay Aquarium was like, that's all they do. It's just like, what's funny? They even have like, in part of their aquarium, they have like, no, this is where we let the animals out.
I've seen it. It's great. It's a great aquarium.
That place is awesome, man.
Awesome.
I love that place.
So excited about that. And then as far as the gallery here at the Hive goes, starting in September is our new season, basically. And so every first Friday we're going to have a new show. And with
that's coming up probably about 2 weeks.
no, that's August. We're not doing it in August because
Oh,
it's too
okay.
hot, so September.
Okay.
But we will have a new show up, and I'm taking calls for new art right now. So that's on my Instagram page at Howland Studios Gallery. So if you're an artist who might want to submit some work, that's where you can find the information on the bio. And so so we're excited to start that. And then this October, like I said, I get to take a group to Africa and come back with some new stories about how.
Where do you go in Africa? I got a couple friends out that way.
We're going to be in South Africa in this trip.
That's where my friends are.
And then part of the group is going on to Kenya. I'm not able to join them for that part this time, but last time we also did Kenya. It was pretty awesome.
Cool.
So yeah.
That's been on the bucket list. I definitely want to go to Africa.
Yeah.
We've been looking at Ghana, South Africa, and Kenya.
Nice. Yeah.
Egypt too. That'd be kind of dope.
Yeah, that would be cool.
my dream trip. God, it would take so much money to do this. I'd have to win the lotto to do this, but it's Casablanca, Marrakesh, Nice, I think is next. Milan.
Yeah, that's going to be an expensive one.
You know what? I priced it out. It's not hard to get there.
No, it's just living there.
It's hard to be there for
yeah.
more than like 3 days and not spend thousands.
No, that's true. But you'll get there. Maybe a little at a time, but you'll get there.
Oh yeah. I told my friend, like, yo, when we get like stupid rich off of winning the lotto or something, all that money is going straight to going straight to that trip. But I appreciate it, April. Thank you for sitting with us. I appreciate it, especially because I think technically you guys are close to it.
Technically I am, but that's okay. I was happy to do it, and I can't wait to hear how it sounds. But before we go, I have one question to ask you. What in the future, as far as art goes, and we're talking like paintings or sculpture or something like that, what do you see yourself buying? Because you're a young man. What do you see yourself buying? Or do you see yourself buying anything?
Wall art for sure.
Yeah.
Wall art for sure.
Okay.
Sculptures are a little bit tougher to do just because it's...
But you see yourself buying from an artist
that
you know or that you appreciate, or...
I've bought some prints from artists before. I know a lot of guys who do graphic design and who do that style. But there is a... My background is very interesting because I have a lot of tech background.
Okay, yeah.
And
so you're probably attracted to that more graphic kind of style.
Not necessarily though, because at the same time you gotta realize we are like taking computer classes in Hawaii. So there's that dichotomy, and I think there is something to be. For me personally, it was like when I have a house, I want to do this. I've also considered like, hey, what if instead of like just buying a print, what if I just called an artist and I was like, yo, that wall's yours, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome. That would be great.
You know, like how cool would something like that be? I think something like that would be really, really awesome.
Cool.
I want to do something different, and there's those pieces, the more physical, pieces, something like that. I think would be awesome. But I do want it to. I love working with the artists. The company I just started with 9 of my friends. But it's called Currency Exchange, and the whole point is getting local artists out there.
Oh, awesome.
So like marketing and branding, as far I can do websites, and my buddy can make NFTs, and we got somebody else who holds events, and we got people who obviously the podcast.
Nice,
and there's things like that. So we want to help people with that.
Awesome.
Like I said, I'm a big sports fan. I grew up playing sports my whole life. To me, this is college sports.
Yeah, that's great.
It's let me get you here.
Yeah.
Like, okay, musician, you got some cool mixtapes, but nobody's listening to them. Let's hold an event for you.
Right.
Let's get you signed by. I mean, don't go with a record label if you don't have to.
Right.
Keep your money.
Right.
Don't sign a 360 deal. But like, let's get you signed with a big label like that. Like, if that's what you want to do.
Well, it's refreshing to hear your generation talking about art and keeping it alive. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's the problem is, as it usually is, it's economic. If you're giving me a choice between I gotta eat and I gotta do this,
absolutely, you have to eat first.
Right.
Yeah. We're all on the same boat there.
I also think it's different. Like a lot of the art that I own is on my body. You know,
Yeah.
especially when I talk to an artist, I talk to them and I'm like, listen, you're the artist at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I chose you,
Yeah.
and not something off the wall.
Very
I
cool.
wanted you to do something with
Very
it.
cool.
So
Glad to hear that.
I think you're right. You're completely right. Art isn't dead. Fine art is interesting to me because you know who's doing a great job actually? Phoenix Art Museum.
Oh yeah. Wonderful.
Doing an amazing job. It's not that expensive.
Mesa Art Center too.
Yes, I used to live down that way. Yeah, Mesa Art Center too. But it's not far. It's not super expensive to get into.
No.
I think it's like $10 for a visit, but on Wednesdays it's free or
it's free.
something like that.
Yep. Yeah.
So I think they do a really good job of like
showcasing fine art.
You don't
appreciate it.
And you don't need to be the kind of ascot wearing tee with the pinky out kind of guy to appreciate art. It's just you can go to the museum and just be like, oh, that's cool.
Be inspired.
Yeah. And I think that's it. But I think you're gonna see. That happens. Usually when I record, it's dogs barking. I'm like, yo, can you stop? Like the mic picks you guys up, man. Even when you're downstairs, you gotta keep bark, bro. Like, but no, it's exciting. It is exciting to see galleries too, because I think with my generation, there's kind of a collective understanding of like, yo, I don't want to eat McDonald's.
Right.
Yo, like Cheesecake Factory is cool. Like if there's nothing else to do,
Right.
I think people are starting to see like. And this is actually an issue I have. I almost moved out of Phoenix. I almost move out of Phoenix like every year. I'm like, yo, I'm done. This is it. But what's starting to pop off in Phoenix that I'm super pumped about is there's so many local spots.
Yeah.
Or regional. I'll give you regional too.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not necessarily from Arizona, but you're from California.
Right.
Or, that kind of gets passed too. But there's so many local spots that I'm starting to see that are interesting.
Yeah.
And it
so
was
many.
not like that.
No, that's
before.
what I mean. It's changing. Phoenix is changing quite a bit in a good way, I think. So, yeah.
And hopefully the identity. I love Los Angeles. I love that city. I'm there a lot. I will be there this summer. No, not really in the summer. Like early September. I'll be out there for a little bit. I got friends out there. I love that city. But I don't want it to be Los Angeles. I don't want it to be Chicago. I don't want it to be Atlanta. I don't want to be Houston because those places exist. We don't need take cues from. Okay, well, how do we get a lot of art in Atlanta? Well, we pay people to make movies here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
that's what they did straight up. How
Yep.
did we get art in LA? Pretty much the same thing, honestly.
Yeah.
In New York, there's just so many people there, and everyone, it's hard not to make up with that many people.
Yeah.
So, obviously take cues from that, but also look at smaller cities. When I lived in Virginia, the art scene was insane just because the artists all supported each other.
Right.
Like in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Newport News, shout out to everybody in the 757, but in that area, you don't even think about art until you realize that, hey, Pharrell's from there, Aretha Franklin's from there, Pusha T's from there.
Yeah.
Now, like, all these people, and then you're like, wow, how are they all coming from this little place? Well, it's because they support each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think Phoenix could do that, but the city's kind of got to get over themselves.
Yeah. Well, I have a good friend of mine working on that part of it too. So I think we're on that. I think that we're on that trajectory. So.
I think we are too.
Yeah.
I think we're too. I'm excited to see how Mesa Art Center really grows, because it is different than Scottsdale.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And that's okay. And that actually is. It's better than okay. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
It should be where it gives you a different flavor.
Yes.
And I think that's what I'm seeing now. Eventually, I would love to move back to Hawaii just because it's unmatched. You can't beat it. And there's always that. If you were able to find a place in Sedona, I'm sure you'd be like,
oh yeah. Hey, if I could move to Hawaii, I would do it too. So I understand that.
But, yeah, appreciate you coming in though. That's a good question. I love when people ask me questions because no one ever does. And so every now and then I'm like, oh dude. Oh, man, you're making it. I like the challenge. I'm like, oh, damn, you made me think.
Good.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thank
you for listening this long. You did it. 12 an hour?
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, it was.
Easy peasy.
Appreciate this.
Here is, I don't know if you list any websites or anything, but this is the adventure artist travel business that I do on the side.
Oh, awesome.
And then...
I'm so glad I didn't hit stop recording.
Yeah, and then this is my personal webpage and stuff. So
I love this style too.
Thanks.
I love this So yeah, I'll definitely so I will definitely post these
Awesome.
out.
Thanks.
I will definitely
Cool.
post them out. All right, I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you. Peace.